his 60-year-old nephew got killed over the weekend, so he had to go to Colorado also.
Bad weekend for someone, isn't it?
Yeah, don't go to work for me.
Bathrooms, porta potties would be another pile.
Oh, boy.
Well, he's not supposed to have a gun anyway.
Something like that,
Yeah.
they should have.
He's a felon, so I don't know what the hell happened there.
Under a block right there. And 4 toilets in the bar. Very good. Yeah. Yeah, that's fine. That's better.
I know you want to sit
Okay, 1:30, we'll resume our meeting after our recess. And up is Corey Swanson.
Thank you. So I submitted a document to the commissioners on July 25th, a request for a supplementary budget addition, or supplementary budget request is what I call it. And that is a result of the very unforeseen and difficult circumstance of the Lloyd Barris case that we have, which is for the death of Deputy Mason Moore. So in the course of spending a lot of time on that case and investigation, of course, we're about 70 days into the case, and so the investigation will be ongoing for quite a while. But certainly in terms of the bulk of the investigative work is done, minus crime lab and some of these forensic things that will take quite a while. And one of the things that's important to note on a case of this nature is that if the state's going to seek the death penalty, it has to make that decision and provide notice to the defense within 60 days after the defendant was arraigned. So when the defendant was arraigned on May 27th, that gave us a deadline of, depending on how you're counting the days, either the 25th or the 26th of July. So, spent a lot of time with the investigators. I met with the Attorney General's, his capital punishment committee, and met with the Attorney General. And we provided notice on, I believe, the 25th to the defense that we were going to seek the death penalty. So when that happens, that greatly affects how you handle a case. Part of that was the resolution this morning that the Attorney General's office is providing prosecution assistance. That's normal. In fact, I don't, other than a very large county like Yellowstone County, I'm not aware of any death penalty case where there hasn't been heavy involvement from the Attorney General's office. I visited with several prosecutors from other counties larger than ours over the years who've all had heavy involvement from the AG's office. Part of that's because the case is gonna live on for a long time, even after the trial stage, and the Attorney General's office does all the appeals, all the post-conviction work, and then whether that's appeals to the state Supreme Court or to federal courts. And so, it's obviously advantageous for them to be in on the very beginning. So that, with that resolution that you passed this morning, there'll be one or more lawyers that are gonna be involved in assisting with the case. The other thing that we noted because of this case is the need for some money to pay for expert witnesses. As I think you're aware, after the legislative session, the legislature did not fund the court administrator's office to the degree that it had previously. And even though there's a statute that says that the court administrator will pay for expert witnesses, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court provided a notice, I'm gonna say end of May, to all the county attorneys that the court system would no longer reimburse for the cost of expert witnesses. So regardless of the case, regardless of this, whether we were doing death penalty or not, our cost for expert witnesses has gone up as a result of that decision. And in this case, regardless of whether we're seeking the death penalty or not, it's still a potential life in prison punishment for a very gruesome homicide. These expert witnesses are needed. So what I requested in my request is $100,000 in a litigation fund for pretrial and trial costs. I anticipate those costs are gonna consist of two main things. One, the experts that I've already discussed. And then two, if this went to trial and were moved to a different location, which is common in a case of this nature in a small county, then those trial costs are gonna be higher. So that, we won't know that for quite a while. That's one of the later motions that come closer to trial. So we may not even know it in this fiscal year. And if that happens, if the judge grants that, then, then we're gonna have to recalculate our costs anyway. So that one may be something we have to revisit. In the course of looking at this, looking at the current caseload, I know we've talked about this quite a bit. It was a topic of discussion before I was even here about whether to have a deputy county attorney. The felony caseload has gone up each year. Each year that I've been here has been the most felony filings in district court. And each year we've done more than that. This year we're on pace for probably 50 felonies. I think the most before I came here might have been 45 in a year, but each year we've done more than that. The reality of a case like this, the Barris case, is that you spend so much more time on this case than a typical case that it's the equivalent of probably 30 felony cases, just in terms of how much research goes into everything, the number of motions, et cetera. And I think there's gonna be some preliminary fights on the front end of the case that I would have anticipated those regardless of whether we seek the death penalty, which we can get into more if need be. Some of the stuff is litigation strategy, which I'd rather not discuss publicly, but the bottom line is that everyone who's been down this road that I've talked to says you cannot sustain your caseload and do this case without a deputy due to the fights that come with this. So we had, prior to this point, the commission had approved some funding for a part-time civil county attorney, contracted, an external. I had requested solicitations, received probably 6 or 7. We haven't closed it, so there's probably still potentially some coming in.
We haven't authorized that hiring of anyone. So you're
Excuse
not interviewing and advertising, are you? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'll,
Okay,
so,
all right, yeah, we
well-
haven't authorized any of that yet.
well,
That's for today.
no, I'm talking about pre all this.
Right, we've never authorized a part-time contract or otherwise civil attorney or a county attorney, deputy county attorney.
Okay, well, to just let you know where that is.
I
Number one,
just thought you had said
Yeah.
you were advertising, so I just wanted to make sure we had that out there.
I requested solicitations from lawyers in order to
Okay.
get a ballpark figure of what we were doing.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
We told you to go ahead on that.
Yeah, the commission told me to go ahead on that. And what's currently in the budget is $25,000 for that. So in looking at those, there's a variety of different proposals that have been out there, that have been sent back. Some of them are a set retainer to work a certain number of hours, go to a certain number of meetings a month. Some of them are a kind of a base level, and then above that would be an hourly fee. Some of them are straight hourly. And so there's kind of there isn't a set uniform proposal that's come back. There are varieties, and obviously depending on what that firm does, and some of them have other local government clients, and so they've tailored it off of what they've done with other places. Anyway, the reality is that $25,000 isn't gonna get you a lot from an outside, part-time attorney. And you're probably looking more like $40,000 to $50,000 to get the amount of time that you may need. Well, not necessarily, or you adjust your expectations to 1 meeting, maybe 2 meetings a month. And some of them will be conference calls, so lawyers aren't traveling and charging you for travel, things like that. But anyway, the point of that is I looked at all these, I realized that if you're spending over half of that what would cost for a deputy, or half of that, and you're really not getting even all of your civil needs met, then it might make more sense to scrap that idea entirely, the outside civil deputy, and ask for a full-time deputy who can do civil misdemeanors. Those would be probably the two, my guess is those would be maybe the two main things. So that's the purpose of that proposal in my request. The third thing that I asked for was some part-time legal secretary assistance. So again, the background on that was Brooke Dolan applied for, and we have been awarded a grant from the Board of Crime Control so that her victim advocate work is paid for 100% by that. Up to this point, it's been 2/3, 1/3, and the county's paid for 1/3 of that. So, or is it 3/5, 2/5?
Yes, 2/5 legal secretary.
So 3/5 victim advocate, 2/5
No,
legal
yes,
secretary. That's right?
yes.
So what we had talked about was that if that grant was successful, that money for legal secretary would be, we could use that for funding some additional legal secretary work and or this additional attorney work. So what I'm recommending is that we use that money for the 2/5 or up to 20 hours a week of legal secretary assistance in the office, for the same reason of everything else. The volume of caseload and the cases are different than they were even 10 years ago. The amount of evidence that comes in on these cases and is more. I mean, the investigations have more witnesses, more evidence. Everybody's got a phone, you know how that is. I mean, it seems to be that the world of defense lawyers has changed, and the expectations of investigation and what to bring to trial and what to present to a jury have just really gone up in probably the past 10 years. We're certainly seeing it. So the result is we have a large volume of evidence, motions, notices to victims, all those things that we're doing all the time. So that's my recommendation and request. I did not request $1 million. So your agenda says request $1 million. I never did that. That's my request is $100,000, a full-time deputy county attorney, and a part-time legal secretary using the money saved from the victim advocate, which would also include not furthering the request for a part-time deputy county attorney. That wouldn't be needed, so that's my request. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Corey?
So
Go ahead.
two-fifths of this, victim's advocate would go towards your secretary then, is that what you're saying?
Correct, and depending on experience and wage scale, things like that, that money may go to more than the 2/5 hours, because it might be somebody that you pay at a lesser hourly rate, and therefore there's more hours, so. It depends on, obviously, the applicants, et cetera. But the goal is to keep it below the level where they would have the benefits of a full-time employee. Unless it already is a full-time employee, which there had been some discussion of some sharing there.
Would Brooke be available to do that? Or that you're already?
So with her grant, she's basically changed to, and it's funded externally, a full-time victim advocate.
Okay.
And part of that was the Marcy's Law passage and implementation. There's a, even though it's in litigation, there's some version of it that's gonna go forward and be implemented. So there's, even though we've been doing the victim advocate work and doing it well, there are certainly some increased communication and documentation requirements. There's actually a lot of requirements, many of which are at odds with each other, which is why it's in litigation. So the point of that, and a lot of counties have done this, is that's to meet the increased requirements for Marcy's Law.
Any other questions up here? Any comments? Eli, Sheriff, or anyone?
I don't have anything today.
This is something where we're gonna have to drill down into the budget, talk about the money, talk about where to find the money. And I think before we're able to get into that, we're gonna have to go into closed session, so that we don't talk about any litigation strategy in an open meeting. This is a big deal. This is probably the most significant decision that's been in front of this commission since I've been on board, and that's 10 years now. We cannot make any of these decisions based on emotions. We know this county's been through hell the last couple of months, but we've got to divorce ourselves of all emotion on this and strictly look at the numbers and what we can do within the budget. According to the chief prosecutor for the state of Montana, in order to pursue this case, we need to find in excess of $1 million, quote. He said in excess of $1 million. And that's to prosecute a death penalty case over a homicide with life sentence without parole. If we cut every single budget in this county by 25%, all departments, we can come close. That's going to hit on justice, and it's gotta give us pause. Is that good governance on our part? Our question cannot be, do we support the death penalty? That being said, yes, I do. But that's also what this monster wanted, death by cop. So, I would like to actually have the discussion we should have had a month or so ago. I think we need to drill down and get to what we can do on this, and I don't think it should be an open door. I think it should be closed doors so we don't hurt your case. I do have 3 civil issues that I think we need to discuss, and Corey, if you wanna wait till Wednesday, if you wanna do it now, it's fine, but we've gotta get the Dahl funeral home figured out.
You're not
We
waiting
have-
on me on that.
We are.
No, you're not.
We have a memo from you, we have a legal, email that says you cannot pay for anybody but deputies to accompany. Then we have a memo from you that says we can pay for the deputies and funeral costs. There's $8,000 of non-deputy airlines. I would like to pay that. I believe that falls under the funeral costs associated.
Who are the non-deputy airlines?
The family, extended family, there's 8, I believe.
Okay.
So what I need from you, so that we don't get challenged and end up in district court and the judge says, Laura, Mike, and Franklin, you will pay this out of your own pockets. I want from you that it's okay to pay those airline tickets, about $8,000 of the total bill. As soon as we get that, I'm happy to sign the claim. I think I've already signed it, but I want your authorization that we're on solid ground to do that you're gonna have our backs if we're challenged.
I already provided the memo, I provided follow-up emails repeatedly. Yes, you can sign and you can pay for all those expenses, you should have done so long ago when I first told you that. That's it.
So you're okay with us paying for all the
That's-
airline
That's
tickets?
the same thing I've sent you twice now.
You haven't, Corey,
Okay.
just give me a yes, will you just give me a yes on the
yes,
record?
pay it,
Thank
please
you.
pay it, please pay it.
Thank you.
I'd be
That's
happy if
all
you paid
we've
it a
wanted.
month ago, so, all right.
All right, did you get any details on the Longhorn issue?
No.
Okay. And then the other one is BLM. Any follow-up on the BLM issue with Montana Internet?
No.
Okay,
I
we
met
need
with-
that for the
I met with
budget.
the owner, and he claimed he had already paid it, and he told me personally that he's willing to pay it, and that's as far as we got.
Okay, we'll ask for follow-up on that. And that's all I have for now.
Of course, you said you request 100,000. Do you think there's gonna be any jump where it's gonna jump up to that million they're talking about? Or would we be involved in that, or what do you think?
So I have discussed that conversation repeatedly with several people in the Attorney General's office, including the Attorney General himself. And this cost of this case certainly may go into that realm, but you have to remember that after the trial stage, when it goes to the post-conviction and it goes to the appellate stage, all those costs are borne by the Department of Justice. They're not from this county. And this case is going to have expenses regardless of whether this is a death penalty case or a life in prison case. The expenses that I have outlined and requested, I would be before you requesting those no matter what, whether we had not filed that notice. Because the experts that we've identified, we're gonna have to go to the private sector to find them. The possibility of a change of venue, that is a possibility regardless of whether it's a capital case. So I would be sitting here asking for the litigation fund regardless, okay? I don't agree, and the folks that I've talked to at length about this do not agree that this is a $1 million in the next year case. Over the course of 20 years, I'm sure it is. But again, that's not what Broadwater County is gonna be asked to fund, and it's certainly not what we're gonna be asked to fund right now. So this idea that you guys have to cut everybody's budget by 25% and set aside $1 million is ridiculous. I mean, last week you came up with $1 million for somebody else, that's fine. I'm not asking you to do that today. And I'm not asking your permission, let's be clear, to file this notice and seek the death penalty. That's not your decision, that decision's been made. And I even if I had had the meeting with you and outlined these expenses and you had told me no, I would have done it anyway, because that's not your decision. That's my decision. What I'm telling you is that this is a case that this is the appropriate punishment for all the reasons of what I know about this and what we've scoured over this case for all this time. These expenses that I've asked for here, certainly the litigation fund, you would have to, we'd either have to pay them up front or we'd have to do some kind of a really pathetic plea agreement at the beginning. We're not gonna do. Because the court system's not paying for expert witnesses like they used to, and the folks that we have to retain they're in the private sector. It's just the way it is. We have a lot of experts that are crime lab experts, that are FBI, that are that are state investigators, that we are not gonna have to pay for. And so keep that in mind, that cumulative cost, there's a great big amount of this cost we are not paying for. And there's been a great amount of costs to date that we haven't paid for. And remember what the sheriff said, we had all these deputies here from other counties that were helping us, and they weren't sending us their overtime bills. And I don't know that Missoula County, isn't Missoula County sent us a bill for jail?
Nothing aware of.
So, I mean, and we need to reframe this discussion. This is not about you as a commission deciding if we're seeking a death penalty case. That's not the decision before you, and it's not going to be the decision before you. And if I was supposed to come ask your permission, if you'd told me no, I wouldn't have cared. Because this is about what is the appropriate remedy in this case for Deputy Moore's death. As far as funding goes, as far as fights over civil things, if we have fights and if there's ongoing problems between yourselves and me, let's try and separate those. Let's try and set those aside. And if the relationship's bad, I'm certainly not taking all responsibility for that. Let's set that aside. Let's focus on what's needed for this case. And I'm telling you, that $100,000 is going to be needed regardless of whether it was a life in prison case or a capital punishment case. Same thing goes for the part-time secretarial help. The deputy county attorney, I mean, I guess, I don't know. I mean, every time I feel like a broken record. Every time I talk to you about caseload, come see court, come see the amount of activity we have. And then what I get is more requests for more civil stuff. Well, every one of those things takes time. And there's a lot of efficiencies I can put into it, but every single case, every single legal matter, at some point requires me and no one else to sit down, research it and evaluate it. And there's only so much of that time that I can rob from other things.
Wayne, you had something?
I do, and you know, I've said numerous times, and I know that Broward County is not just about public safety and the justice system. We've talked about that numerous times, but I will guarantee that in the near future, there's gonna be a change of venue request by Greg Jackson. I obviously saw it yesterday during the parade. There's a lot of support in Broward County for Mason and his family. There's no way to find a non-prejudicial or biased juror in Broward County that could look at this. So I would foresee Great Falls when Sanchez did a motion to change of venue for the death of Joe Dunn. It was sent all the way to Yellowstone County. That's not a day drive. I mean, that's when you're driving down in the morning, driving back at night. You're gonna camp out in a hotel room and live out of a suitcase, is what's gonna happen, and it's gonna take a long time. Like I've said before, Broward County's never been faced with anything like this. We've had homicides in the past, some that incurred some expense. I know they did a public safety meal, a mercy bill back in the day when they had the homicide with the 6 folks, the 6 gypsies, and Rich had to go around the nation picking them up. So we're not uneducated when it comes to homicide cases. We've never had a death of a law enforcement officer, and that being a homicide as well, and not many counties have. And so I guess, what Corey says is the game has changed in the last 10 years. It's changed dramatically in the last 20 years. And what we have to do out there is a lot more, and hence why I've had numerous conversations with you about the cost of doing business. So what Corey says, we're not here to get along. We're here to take care of a mission and a goal, and we all need to work together and make it work out right. But we have a huge task in front of us that with Lloyd Barris, and I would hope that you guys look at this and understand it, and if not understand it, ask the right questions to clear the image for you. But it's an important thing, and I think I'm one that if this wasn't a death penalty case, then what is? I would love to hear the definition if this isn't it, because that's exactly what they did, was executed my guy, and they made it personal and did it that way. So if this isn't a death penalty case, then there's not one in the United States that is that. And, so I think we're on the right track in that scope as well, so, about all I have though.
Actually, right now, Corey, you're asking for this 100,000, that's basically what you're asking for right now. And we all understand, or I do, and I think everybody else does, that there's a change of venue. That's just something that has to be worked out at that time. Would this, I think you already answered that once, the state help on that any at all?
Well, so if they have 2 or 3 lawyers, or probably 2 lawyers on the case, then they'll pay for their housing and all that, right? As far as our expenses, so, you know, we've got witness expenses, which you have to pay witness fees anyway. A lot of those regular witnesses, a lot of them come anyway from the court system. But we're talking just the expense of actually moving to somewhere else. I once lived in Billings for a 2-month trial, so maybe we live in Billings or Great Falls for a month. You know, those are the expenses that we're talking about. And then, you know, you're drawing a jury from that county. And so I'm assuming we have to pay those jury fees, just like if they was here, we'd pay the jury fees. So some of those are unavoidable, but I think they would be more expensive because it would be a change of venue.
Yeah.
So that's down the road, that's an unknown.
Yeah, that's
I
right.
agree with Wynn that they are gonna seek it, but that's, you know, in terms of life of a case, that's later, that's closer to the trial date. And this thing, the defense has already continued it a little bit farther out already from our fall hearings, so.
And then back there, right now, our decision is to make, is for this 100,000, which, now that's gonna take care of your deputy.
So, no, so there's a couple of things, and if you don't wanna put the money aside right now, soon, then the next couple of months, I am gonna start having a couple of these costs that we're gonna be coming in. So if you want, I can present those costs at that time, but those are gonna be costs for experts that are gonna be not anticipated at the time of the budget, and they're gonna be outside that budget, so.
Okay.
The second thing on the deputy, I mean, the deputy is the one that I would like to do right now, because we're already, I mean, I'm already spending, you know, big blocks of time on this case, where I'm literally shutting the door to everything else. And that's not gonna change, that's gonna increase. It's not gonna go away, it's gonna increase. So litigation fund is something that I just need to know that if I have to retain somebody, that it's $25,000, that I can get the money and get going on it, and not be waiting, and I don't wanna keep having this argument every month when it comes time to pay a bill of somebody that's helping us on the case.
What do you foresee as a time frame on this? Have you got any idea?
The soonest it would go to trial would be about a year from now, my guess.
And we're not involved in anything after that trial? After that, it's the state's problem?
So, well, then there's a sentencing process where there's gonna be some pretty significant hearings for that. So there'll be some more experts, or the same experts will be doing more work on that. Once the sentencing's done, then it becomes the state's
Oh,
deal.
state.
There's a thing called, there's a couple different routes after your sentencing. There's a thing called post-conviction, where it does come back for some stuff at the trial judge level, where we're involved in it and doing it, but in this case, because of the nature of this case, that's gonna be very heavily done by the state. Once it's in any appeal stuff, then that's the state.
So a minimum of this increase in staff, particularly in the deputy, is probably gonna be a minimum of a year
And
to
then-
18 months?
Yeah, because then, you know, sentencing is 4 months after, and post-conviction, if you get into post-conviction before they do the appeal, that's usually I don't know, it's complicated. These cases tend to have more, you know, trips back to the appeal than a typical case. They get at least an extra one. So they go to federal court sometimes. Those, I wouldn't be doing any of that.
Is this deputy attorney position, is this something we can fill with a graduate person? Or a new new graduate lawyer versus getting someone that's highly experienced?
Yeah, it all depends on, you know, timing, if there's someone available right now.
Would that person be, would that person have time to set up some other off-site practice to supplement their income, or are they gonna be too busy to even do that?
Well, if you're a full-time deputy, you can't, you're not allowed to, but I don't know.
Can we, is a partial time gonna help you, or is a partial time not gonna do you any good? Like if we went a 75%, 3/4 time or something like that, or are we still gonna have to be, I realize when you're gone for the trial, that's who we're with, but in all of this preparation time, you still have a quarter of your time to dedicate to county where we could hire this person on a 75% versus a 100% work week?
My guess what you're gonna get is a young person who wants a full-time job and is, you know, daunted by the idea of setting up their own law practice. And so what you'd instead wanna do is, instead of, let's say you're looking at somebody who is, I don't know, just, I guess, 2 years full-time and then scale it back. I mean, I almost think the better option there is to keep the deputy full-time and make the county attorney part-time. If it's me, that's the better option, because I'm not afraid to do additional stuff I'm probably gonna retire from the National Guard, but if I stayed in, then that would be a better solution to reduce the cost, but that's
The hard
a
thing
couple
with
road
that,
down
Mike,
the road.
is that the state pays half of the county attorney's salary. So if we were paying for a full deputy and only had a part-time county attorney, we're losing a nice chunk from the state. We're now paying the whole thing almost by ourselves. So it would be better to go the other way around, or what we talked about before, and that is hiring a deputy attorney, county attorney, just for the duration of this case. When there's a sentencing or a plea, then we're done. And we renegotiate, relook at numbers, whatever we have to do there. But we would be wiser to keep the county attorney position as full-time because of the 50% cost share.
And that deputy attorney wouldn't be tied to elections at all?
Right. I would say don't do it just to end at the moment that case ends, but that you re-examine at that end of that fiscal year going into the next one, whether to reauthorize, eliminate it, make it part-time, whatever. So that it's not, because you can't be one of those things where you're literally, sentencing got continued for 30 days, okay, you have 30 more days of a job. I mean, it needs to be something, a more certain benchmark than that.
So this isn't even gonna get to court until next fiscal year, right? Is that what you're thinking?
My guess is that it would be next fiscal year before it goes to trial. But
What
it
about,
depends, it depends.
you told us that it had to be, because of the death penalty issue, this had to actually be quicker through the justice process, and that this October you would be starting with the mental issues. That's not the case?
So, some of that stuff, really shouldn't be discussed publicly,
Okay,
but.
and that of course was my request before. There's a lot we have to discuss.
Once the verdict's done, or the guilty plea is done, then by law, in a case like this, sentencing has to be within 120 days. Which is, ordinarily they are on cases, there are some that aren't. John Wright's sentencing was well past 120 days, for example.
My questions are all to, I just don't think that mine should be in open session, but if they have to be, I'll ask them in open session. So, I do want some discussion about all this. The $1 million comes from Brent Light at the Attorney General's office.
I talked to Brent.
And it's a concern. You're asking for $100,000, and I think based on our conversations with Brant, I think we have to plan for the best, hope for the best, plan for the worst, and prepare to be surprised. If we don't go into this having our eyes wide open and having good communication, we'll be knocking on the door of bankruptcy for Broadwater County, and that's my worry. So before we make any decision, we've got to have a conversation.
What are you talking about surprises?
We have been advised by the Attorney General's office that there will be an army of expert witnesses that we can expect to pay about $65,000 apiece. Not including their travel, not including their stay here, just for their expertise.
Okay, so
Now,
this,
we're talking
let's-
about
no, no,
$100,000 in your
hang on.
account,
This- No, I'm
and
asking
it's
you,
gone with
I'm
one-
asking you to stop. Cause you, for two reasons. First, you are discussing things that are.
Then let's close the door and have an open discussion. But these things need to be discussed with the full commission before we make decisions out of ignorance.
That's fine.
All three of
That's
us
fine.
should have been doing a lot
That-
of research on this, a lot of talking to people. I wanna know what these guys have found too.
Okay, that's fine. Then we need to do that in a closed door setting. Because for one, you're saying more than, but you're saying stuff that I don't believe is current.
Let's have a conversation, and that's what I'm asking for, but let's not throw stuff out there that may or may not be true and then squash any debate about it. We need, I think, to close the door, have an honest discussion, all be on the same page of understanding, and then move forward in a way that's intelligent and not trying to keep some people in the clouds.
I'm
so
not trying to
that-
keep anybody in the
I don't
clouds.
think you are, but I think there's definitely clouds here. And until we have an honest discussion, we are not gonna come out of those clouds and have a common understanding of where to even start with this. This is a big deal, and we've gotta take it seriously. So if we could shut the door and have an honest discussion, I think that would be best.
I'm asking you, Corey, what do you think?
That's fine.
Okay, we'll go to closed door meeting.
Perfect, yeah, and I'll shut off the camera.